our profession growing. So this is
Hi.
kind of a professional outlook of what our profession looks like from compared to other healthcare professions and all occupations in general. So you can see, we're growing, and we're growing at a faster pace than a lot of other healthcare professionals. People usually always want to hear about the salaries, and so you can see this kind of dot plot here and line matrix of showing the steady increase in our salaries over the last 10 to 15 years. We've specifically seen a jump in the last decade or so, where that little thing we call COVID that happened about 5 or 6 years ago, we saw a lot of athletic trainers see salary bumps there because they were considered essential workers. They had knowledge and skills to help the schools and the universities and even the hospitals, for those of them that were employed by hospitals, help navigate the pandemic in different ways. And so people really started to see the value of athletic training in some of those more non-traditional settings, as well as our traditional settings after COVID. But we see definitely an increase in our salaries over the years. If you look at this table, we're in District 5, is kind of the Midwest region. And so you can see in 2023, our average salary was about $60,000. We see this also kind of broken down by years of experience. And so it's pretty common for students right out of school to be making right around $50,000. Most of the students that graduated from my program last year were making somewhere in the $50,000 to $55,000 range, and depending on how long those contracts and stuff were, based off of the employer that they were working at, whether that was a school or a hospital or a clinic or whatnot. So we're definitely seeing that grow over time. Then you can kind of see it broken down by sports. I will tell you that anecdotally, we see schools that are kind of those high-level D1 schools actually pay less than some of the other college settings, mainly because there's just a higher level of desire for people to want to work in that setting. They tend to be more competitive jobs, and so they don't have to pay quite as much to get a qualified person. Whereas schools like mine at UNO, kind of a mid-major D1, even you guys up at Morningside, their starting salaries are typically better because they're trying to attract truly top level talent in order to work in those settings. So if you want to be an athletic trainer, what do you need to do? First of all, you need to graduate with an undergraduate degree. We basically phased out our undergraduate programs in athletic training over the last 4 or 5 years. And so there are no longer any other routes to get into athletic training through an undergraduate program. You have to go through a master's program. So in order to get into a master's program, you've got to graduate with an undergrad or a BS. Most students do some sort of an exercise science, kinesiology, health and human performance as their undergraduate degree. Once you get admitted to a program, obviously you need to graduate from that program. Most programs are 2 full years, and a lot of them will start in the summer, not necessarily in the fall. Once you graduate from that program or you're getting ready to graduate, you can sit for the National Board of Certification exam. Our program sees a higher level first-time pass rate on that than the national average. So if you're looking at athletic training and even looking at things like physical therapy and those types of things, be looking at their first-time pass rates on their national exams, and those kind of give you a hint of the quality of the program that you're trying to apply to. And then once you pass your Board of Certification exam, obviously you'll try to apply for jobs, and then you'll get licensed in that state wherever you're going to work. And then for our program in particular, we have 100% of our students get a job within 6 months after graduation. And a lot of them are getting jobs within 2 or 3 months after graduation. If you're looking around online to see if a college or university has an athletic training program, you're going to be wanting to look for a logo that looks like this, kind of in the bottom right corner of the screen. to indicate that it's an accredited program. If you don't see that logo somewhere on their websites, they may not be accredited, and you may not be able to sit for the BOC exam after you graduate. So be on the lookout for that logo on their websites. Most athletic training programs are going to require the same types of prerequisite courses, very similar to what you would have to take from a prereq standpoint for physical therapy or PA or even chiropractic school. We want you to have some basic science classes, bio, chem, physics, but then we also want you to be having some foundational knowledge in nutrition, psychology, biomechanics, exercise physiology. And then most programs are going to require you to have at least a couple of anatomy and physiology courses. That's truly the foundation of what we do as an athletic trainer, is anatomy. And so we want to make sure that you've got some good foundational knowledge, particularly in that discipline. We look at those 7 or 8 classes, and we look at your GPA in those classes by themselves, in addition to your cumulative GPA. And so, getting those good grades, A's and B's in those science classes is certainly a plus. But we want to see that GPA above a 3.0, which is fairly strict. Our program requires you to do 25 hours of observation with an athletic trainer. We want to make sure that you have spent some time working with an athletic trainer and that you didn't watch some TikTok or YouTube video on what an athletic trainer is and make your decision to go into the profession based off of the really fun stuff that you see on the social media platforms. Spending time with an athletic trainer will show you some of the ins and outs of the profession that you're not going to be able to see on those social media platforms to help you make an informed decision. We also ask you to write a statement of purpose. Why do you want to be an athletic trainer? What are your career goals? Those types of things. We ask for 2 letters of recommendation, and then you'll do an interview with the admissions committee with most programs, including mine. So I do want to kind of clue you into the letters of rec. It used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago. Letters of rec would really kind of help seal the deal of you getting into a program, but we don't put a ton of weight into those just because we know that you're hand-picking those people to talk really, really good about you. And so even PT school and PA and OT and all of those programs while they'll still require letters of rec, we tend to not weight those on it from an admission standpoint quite as heavily as we once did 10 or 15 years ago. My program in particular is 47 credit hours. For those of you looking at athletic training programs, I'm going to make sure that you clue into this number. Just because an athletic training program is accredited doesn't mean that we're all the same. So my program, and from kind of a regional perspective of looking at the Midwest, is in the top 3 numbers of fewest credit hours that we need for you to graduate. But we're also in the top 3 for first-time pass rates in the region as well. So you'll see total number of credit hours range anywhere from the mid 40s all the way up to almost 70 credit hours that you have to pay for in order to graduate. So definitely pay attention to that, as well as pay attention to the tuition models. Not every program uses in-state tuition, especially if you're looking at a public university. Some of the athletic training programs will charge a flat rate for tuition, regardless of whether you're an in-state student or out-of-state student. So definitely pay attention to those things as you're looking, and that goes true for physical therapy as well as OT and PA school as well. I mentioned that my program is 6 semesters. We start in the summer, and so you go summer, fall, spring, summer, fall, and you graduate in that second spring semester. You're looking at about 9 credit hours per semester, or about 3 or 4 classes per semester is what you would take full-time. In addition to taking classes, we require you to do clinical rotations. And we have a variety of those here in and around the Omaha metro area. UNO, Creighton, Iowa Western Community College, Bellevue University. We work with about 15 to 20 area high schools, as well as some health systems here in town to allow you to do some surgery observations and work specifically with some physicians. This is just a quick snapshot of what our curriculum looks like and kind of the number of classes that you take each term. This is actually getting updated for next year, even though that we're still waiting on a couple of approvals from our different places on campus to update, but just essentially swapping out some courses, not making any drastic changes to the curriculum from what you see on this slide. All right, I'll pause there for just a second and see if you guys have any questions that I can answer specifically about the profession of athletic training on the stuff I covered, or anything about trying to get into an athletic training program.
What's the per credit cost?
For an in-state student for my program, we're looking at about $375 per credit hour. And so total wise, that equates out to around $20,000-ish to complete the program. And so an out-of-state student is about twice that, so that's $800 or $900 a credit hour. And then a lot for our regional folks that come from the 15 kind of Midwest states in and around Nebraska. They offer a deal where you can get 150% of in-state tuition per credit hour. So that's right around the $525, $550 range. So even if you're an out-of-state student and you're from one of those kind of surrounding 15 states, it's still a pretty good deal from a tuition model standpoint compared to some schools that you'll look at to go to do in-state tuition.
What does your interview process look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, so after you submit all of the application materials, we review that. You do about a 30-minute Zoom interview with me, as well as 2 or 3 other folks on our admissions committee. And really, it's not necessarily to grill you with questions. It's more of to try to get a better idea of who you are, what your goals are, and make sure that our program is going to be a good fit for you, and you're going to be a good fit for our program. So just learning a little bit more about you and why you want to go into athletic training, and some of the nuances that we can't necessarily read about in some of your application materials. So it sounds like a big deal, but really it's more of kind of just an informal conversation of your application and why you want to be an athletic trainer.
What's something everybody could look to do to boost their applications, no matter what profession?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that folks are looking at right now is GPAs, especially cumulative GPA. For the class that I'm going to admit this coming summer, their average GPA is a 3.6. And so if you're flirting with that 3.0 GPA, your application is going to be less competitive. So definitely be looking at those basic science classes, biochem, physics, psych, some of those classes, and get as good a grades in those classes as you possibly can. And that doesn't matter if you're looking at AT or physical therapy or OT. I'll tell you that my program, we get about 40 to 50 applications per year for 20 spots that we have open. And for physical therapy, those guys get, like UNMC, that's right down the road from us. Those guys are getting 400 to 500 applications per year for 80 spots. So the better that you can do GPA wise to make your application come out of that first round of reviews, the better chance that you're going to have to get an interview and to be selected for admission.
What's one of the things that can kill an application?
From our standpoint, it's just not following directions. There's multiple things that we ask you to turn in. And so if I have to ping you a bunch of times to try to get something turned in, that's one big thing that we run into, is people just not paying attention to directions a ton. So again, I can move on to the next application pretty quickly. And so if you don't have everything there for me to look at, your application kind of goes into the do not admit pile pretty quick. And I would say the same thing for PT and OT and some of those other professions.
Cool. Any questions? Good.
All right. Well, I will move in and we'll talk specifically about, some of the job skills that we have as athletic trainers. I mentioned earlier, our job is to really focus on prevention, assessing injuries, rehabbing those injuries, and then dealing with emergency situations. So we'll just kind of quickly go through some of these. Some of you may be familiar with this picture on the left in the functional movement screen, or the FMS. Some of you may have done this as an athlete as kind of just a general screening. But this is a really good way for us to just generally look at somebody and look at their form or their movement patterns and make some decisions based off of, some corrective exercises and those things that they might be able to do to help prevent injuries in the future. At UNO, we have what we call a pitching lab. So this picture on the right is a couple of my students looking at one of our pitchers from UNO. Our pitchers come into our lab 3 times a year. We do a full head-to-toe assessment of their range of motion, flexibility, strength, and then we do a biomechanics assessment of their pitching. And so that whole process takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours per pitcher. And we can really look to identify some specific movement patterns that may be setting that pitcher up for injury, or look to identify some things that might help them improve in their performance and, throw an extra couple mile an hour on their fastball or something like that. So the work that we've done in that lab is actually significantly translated. So after the last 3 or 4 years, we've gone from baseball being one of the most expensive sports from a medical cost standpoint on our campus to the least expensive sport, where we had total insurance claims of less than a couple $1,000s for last season. So we're keeping them healthier, which is good, keeping them from going underneath the knife to do things like labrum repairs and Tommy John surgeries and those types of things. So we do this with baseball, but we also do this with our softball team and a couple of other teams on our campus as well. So kind of a unique way that we look at prevention. From an assessment standpoint, this graph that you see on the left-hand side of your screen, this is the graph that we use to make essentially every clinical decision an athletic trainer has to make. So we get an athlete or a coach that asks, hey, can I go back into play after they have an ankle sprain? Well, we're using this graph to figure out kind of where they're at in the healing process to determine whether or not it's in their best interest to try to continue to play on it, or whether or not we should probably, keep them out of competition and really work on rehabbing and strengthening and those types of things. So, for those of you that are going into some of the rehab sciences type professions, AT, PT, OT, you're going to learn this really in depth and be able to make a lot of your decisions for patient care based off of this graph and where they're at in the healing process after an injury. Injury or emergency care. So who can tell me who the 2 folks are here on the left-hand side of the screen? Any ideas? Who's the guy in the USA basketball jersey?
Would you say if it's a Bronny?
Bronny James, yep. What about the guy in the football jersey on the right? I heard something.
Dave, what'd you say?
I said Damar Hamlin.
That's it. You got it. What do these 2 guys have in common? They both collapsed. They both had a sudden cardiac arrest or a sudden cardiac event that ultimately their lives were in jeopardy. And so those of you that remember January 2023, when Damar Hamlin collapsed on Monday Night Football in early January, that was an event that made national headlines and really put the work that Greg and I's profession does in a national spotlight. So Damar had a condition called commotio cordis. He was hit in his chest at exactly the right time in his heart rhythm to cause his heart to stop beating. And so if you see the video from that, you see him take the hit, and then a couple seconds later, he's collapsed on the ground. It wasn't an immediate thing. There was a slight delay in how he ended up unconscious and unresponsive. Within 60 seconds of him hitting the ground, the athletic training and the sports medicine staff had an AED on him, and they proceeded to do active CPR on him for about 20 minutes on the field. Once they got him moved into an ambulance, he also coded in the ambulance, and they were doing CPR in progress to the hospital as well. Ultimately, his story comes out positive on the other end. He was able to make a return to playing football at the beginning of the next season. So definitely something we pay attention to and highlight. About 6 months later, Bronny James was at a basketball practice and had a sudden cardiac arrest there as well. That one wasn't on national television like DeMar's was, but certainly credit the athletic trainers and the medical professionals that were on site at his practice for quick intervention for him to survive that incident as well. So we definitely pay attention to the CPR and emergency care. What about this guy over here on the right-hand side of your screen? Who's this guy?
Top or bottom?
Well, it's the same guy though.
Oh,
One on the top's more of a video.
okay.
So who's this guy down here in the bottom right?
Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill, the cheetah. If you followed him when he was a Kansas City Chief, that was what Mitch Holthus referred to him as he was the fast guy in the field. What happened to him this last season? He dislocated his knee. He didn't just dislocate his patella, he dislocated his entire knee. And so pretty serious injury that when previous folks have had that, have ultimately ended in multiple surgeries. And he was at risk for potentially a lower leg amputation as well. He almost could have lost his whole lower leg there. So the way that athletic trainers step in and treat these injuries right off the bat oftentimes leads to them potentially being able to come back to play afterwards, even though it's a pretty serious medical event that they sustain. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this video. This is actually just a video of Damar Hamlin and them actually doing CPR in the field. This is not something that you saw if you were watching that game on Monday Night Football. They did a really good job of trying to hide the care, which is good. But ultimately, this is from a spectator in the stadium taking a phone video of them actually doing CPR right there on the field. So we'll skip over that. And then the last little thing that I'll highlight is therapeutic intervention. So after somebody gets hurt, we have to get them back to play. So this is where athletic training and physical therapy have a lot of overlap. We use a lot of the same modalities. We use a lot of the same exercise prescriptions and protocols to return an athlete to play. And so we spend a lot of our time working with athletes in this area, whether it's an injury that requires surgery or whether it's something that's as simple as an ankle sprain, doing rehab with them to get them back to play. I think that's pretty much it for my slides. And Greg, I think we may lose our connection here in just a second.